You're live, Your Worship.
All right, thank you very much, Clerk Helmke. Good afternoon, members of council, members of staff. We are getting underway here with our special council meeting. We have a pretty straightforward agenda to talk more about the community hall presentations and make some decisions in regards to those. So it's a pretty straightforward agenda here today. I hope that you're all ready for the meeting. I know we have members of our staff as well, so great to have our members of our staff joining us. All right, council, let's get underway. We'll call the meeting to order with the approval of the agenda for Monday, August the 30th, 2021. Recommendation be it resolved, the council of the Township hereby approve the agenda dated August the 30th, 2021 as presented. And I have a mover and seconder on the motion, please. Mr. Broderick, Mr. Walker. Thank you, gentlemen. And I will look to see if there's any changes. Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. And disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Anybody with any disclosures on the agenda today? Thank you. Seeing none, if anything comes up, please bring it forward. We'll deal with it immediately. And so at this point, we go to item number 3 on our agenda. This is Community Hall's presentation. Mr. Terry Vachon is here. And Terry, this is the 3rd meeting that we've had with this discussion. And I hope that this will bring us to a better point in the whole discussion of small halls. So, council, if there's nothing further, I'm going to turn the floor completely over to Terry Vachon once again, and he will lead us off with the first presentation regarding the Dunedin Community Center. Terry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me with my, awesome. So very quick update for council, Your Worship, just before I share my screen regarding the Dunedin Hall. So yeah, like you said, this is meeting 3 of 3. I have already started having discussions with the first 2 halls with Burnside. So if you recall, direction was provided by council to start working with Burnside and the halls. And so we've already started booking the first 2 in the middle of September, which is great. In some discussions with Burnside from a timing perspective, it is looking like we should be able to provide council with final reports by the end of 2021. So hopefully sometime in November or December. Burnside has committed to us to getting these reports done. So some really good news. So without further ado, Your Worship, I'm going to share my screen. I will bring up the Dunedin Hall first. Can you see my screen properly? Yes, perfect. So again, hall number 5 of 6. Again, if council or the public was inquiring in which order we determined to present the halls, it was based on the resolution or the feedback that we actually received from the hall boards. So Dunedin was the 5th to get back to us. The first cover page here, you will see the resolution that was put through by the Dunedin Hall board. And I'll read it very quickly. So it was moved by Claire Duroutier and seconded by Donna Hamill, that be it resolved that the Dunedin Village Hall Board hereby approve moving forward with a modified FADS option in conjunction with the governing bodies and legislation as required. So again, very similar to the previous 4 presentations, very same template. You will see a very similar setup. The second page here, again, very similar. This is the list of items that RG Burnside's had provided to council back in 2019 with respect to the list of suggested improvements to meet the AODA requirements. Again, at the top, it shows you the proposed amounts as of 2019 and as well as 2021 estimates, including inflation. Third slide here, again, on the left side was the options that council provided the Dunedin Hall board. Just for council's recollection, the first option that was provided was to, again, implement modified FADS to the existing building. Again, using the 2021 estimates, we were looking at approximately $520,000. Again, council provided the same 75-25% commitment ratio to the Dunedin Hall board. And of course, this would include the kitchen renovations to meet the NFPA fire code. A second option that was put on the table by council was to sell the building to the hall board for $1. Again, very similar to the previous boards, and there would be some continued support provided by council. So the Dunedin Hall board, again, like very similar to the other four, also were not interested and also rejected the hall board, the council's option of selling the building. So they would prefer that the building remain in township's ownership. So on the top part here, Dunedin Hall board agreed in principle implementing the modified FADs to the existing building, but they also felt that it still required a lot more information to move forward. Some suggestions that were made by the Dunedin Hall board to the RJ Burnside proposal were the following. So they suggested that they make all washrooms gender neutral, that they install one on the upper floor and one on the lower floor, rather than multiple multi-stalls washrooms on both floor. Also consider making the lower level washroom accessible from the outside of the building. And third, to consider adding a parking spots on the upper level to the south on the main door to eliminate the requirement for a ramp. And the proposed ramp would be unsightly, hard to maintain, and it would keep clean in the wintertime. It was also very long and very expensive. The Dunedin Hall board was not prepared to make a financial commitment of 25%. They are willing to fundraise to the best of their ability, but are dubious that they will be able to raise that much money. They felt that the proposed renovations were also overly costly. Third bullet was to modify the original concept and list of modified FADs provided by RJ Burnsides to adhere to the NVCA regulations that were provided. They would like to also include the cost of required renovations to the commercial kitchen, as well as include potential kitchen upgrades to meet the fire code standards. So that's what the feedback that was received from Dunedin Hall. Again, pretty much in line with the modified FADs, with their own list of suggested renovations. Some key notes for council to consider was that the Dunedin Hall board had expressed a willingness to proceed with the renovations. Staff requested an environmental constraint review from RJ Burnside for the proposed addition to the Dunedin Hall because it's so near to the Norsey River, as per the NEC and NVCA policies. There's also included the NVCA permit requirements. RJ Burnside's report is provided to council. Some key points from that report was that the review had identified limitations to the area that was available for the proposed additions. An addition is feasible at the Dunedin Hall site in a different manner than what was originally proposed by RJ Burnside. And any additions would have to be oriented perpendicular to the hall, as an example in an L shape, which given the hall's floor plan may require more interior modifications than a simple extension off the back of the hall, which was originally proposed by RJ Burnsides. So in a nutshell, based on our discussion with the Dunedin Hall board, they provided some concerns about the Norsey River and the addition. So we proceeded to approach NEC and NVCA to get their feedback. And as we mentioned, their report was provided to council. And again, long story short, renovations can still be done, but instead of going out the back of the hall, it would have to be on an L-shaped pattern. Again, staff considers no in-house renovations or donated materials or services would be permitted under the Clearview Township's procurement process and construction liability protocols. Again, Clearview Township would hire the services of RJ Burnside engineering firm to manage the tendering and construction of any renovations. That council approves final specifications, designs of the hall renovations in consultation with the Dunedin Hall board. Council, with the hired services of their engineers, will be responsible for ensuring all renovations are completed as per the approved specifications and designs. And finally, council may or may not choose to postpone any decisions until they review all of the individual hall board reports. So until all 6 hall board reports are brought back to council. Some possible next steps. Option 1 is to review the requirements and estimated costs to renovate the Dunedin Hall as per the modified FADs. Again, as per RJ Burnside's list of renovations and estimated costs. Again, as per the environmental constraints review for the proposed addition to the Dunedin Hall near the Noisy River. Again, as per the NEC and NVC policies. This option would also include septic and kitchen commercial and fire code renovations. Staff predicts that it would cost approximately $8,000 for the Dunedin Hall. Again, timelines would be approximately 3 months prior to any approvals, and staff would return to council with final project specifications and estimated project costs, which would include the septic renovations, the commercial kitchen, the outdoor add-on of accessible washrooms, and a fire standard renovations. Option 2, again, very similar to the previous 4 hall boards, would be for a status quo and just don't do any renovations. So those are the 2 options that staff has proposed to council. There may be others, but those are the 2 that we propose at this time. Also, we would also update the management agreement between the Kellyview Township and the Dunedin Hall Board, which would include renewed operations of the hall, the financial commitment of the Dunedin Hall Board with corresponding financing provisions, and clarify any outstanding misapprehensions to the existing agreement. Again, just to refresh council's memory, the existing agreement with all the hall boards is one agreement for all 6. We would also create a construction agreement with the Dunedin Hall Board regarding the level of responsibilities and liabilities between both parties. Again, we would return to council with both final agreements to be approved. Again, we predict approximately 4 months for that process, and ultimately we would release a public tender for renovations for the Dunedin Hall. That's all I have at this time, Your Worship, for the Dunedin Hall Board. I will stop sharing my screen for you, and I made myself available for any questions regarding the Dunedin Hall.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Vachon. I appreciate your review and presentation here today. Mr. Deputy Mayor Burton, anybody else? Go ahead, Barry.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So for the benefit of all involved, I contacted the director of the NEC today, and there is in fact exemptions for requiring a development permit. And I'll state the maintenance, repair, construction, or improvement of a building or structure for fire safety and fire exists in barrier-free access. So because we're meeting AODA for barrier-free access, we will not be required to have an NEC permit. And then there was talk about I was talking to the mayor today, and was talk about whether the septic tank, and again, it is exempt maintenance, repair, replacement, or decommissioning of a private sewage disposal system that services only the lot on which it is located. So in both cases, we would not require an NEC permit. So I don't see why the NVCA would have to require a permit, because as a provincial jurisdiction and sitting on the county accessibility committee, I think I believe that it trumps the others. So I don't think we need to get a permit from the NVCA either. But I haven't confirmed the NVCA. I have confirmed the NEC does not require a development permit.
Can I just clarify with you then, Deputy Mayor, that's the director you were speaking to, the staff person?
Yeah, I was talking to the director of the NEC, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Yes, she's a staff person, yes.
Okay, perfect.
So the director has the authority, just to add to that, the director has the authority to approve any application that comes before her. And then, unless it requires the special conditions, then it comes in front of the commission for approval. But she actually has the authority to approve applications, standard applications.
All right, very good. Mr. Vachon, would you be able to comment on anything about the NVCA then? I think the deputy mayor has pretty well covered Niagara Escarpment. Is there anything further that you can share with us about the NVCA and any contacts you've had with them regarding this project?
No, not this time, Your Worship. Again, I relied on RG Burnsides to communicate with both NEC and NVCA. Again, they provided us a thorough report back to us and council for their review. I mean, you know, if we require a permit or not, I have no comment, Your Worship. I don't know. I rely on RG Burnsides, and the feedback that they received was a permit would be required, but we can further explore that. You know, as we move forward through the process, we can definitely check that out.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that update. All right, Councillor Broderick is in there. Is anybody else? And then Mr. McKechnie, anybody else? Okay, go ahead, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Deputy Mayor Burton, just a further question on that information. Would that also be the same if the property were to enter private hands?
I'm not sure about that. I can't answer that. I don't know. That would be, if it was privately owned for public use, possibly. I'm not sure. I'd have to ask that question. Because a private building isn't necessarily forced to meet the AODA standards that we as a municipality are forced to meet. So,
yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate that. I just think it's something that we probably should know if we're going to look at all of, well, if we're going to look at this in a well-rounded point of view.
I can ask the question for sure. I'll try to get an answer for you on that, Councillor.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, John. Oh, that's a good question. I agree. Good question indeed. It'll be helpful for Terry too when he's talking with RJ Burnside to keep that in mind as well. All right, I saw Councillor McKechnie. You're next. Is there someone else? Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Your Worship. So thank you very much, Barry, for bringing that information forward. And I think that's more or less covered in option number 1 anyway, that you know, I think that we'll leave it. It's something that Terry and Burnside can look into further. But I think, you know, thanks, Barry, for bringing that forward. I would like to make a motion, Your Worship. And the motion is, be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Clearview hereby 1, approve moving forward with option 1 as outlined in the presentation for the Dunedin Hall, and 2, that it be funded from the existing hall's renovation reserve.
All right, thank you for the motion on the floor. Seconder, I'm looking. I see Councillor or Deputy Mayor Burton first. All right, is there anybody with questions regarding the motion that McKechnie has brought forward? Yes, Mr. Broderick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just feel that it might be a little premature without, well, I'd like answers to my question before we actually make that move.
I see. If I may comment, or I think we got some requests to speak already, but how about John? I'll just say this, that option number 1 is similar to the other motions that we passed that asked staff to work with Burnsides to bring back fulsome information that then we can consider fully each step along the way. So right now we're moving from sort of phase 1 to phase 2, and then phase 3 will be receiving a report from RJ Burnside on each individual hall, which will also include potential quotable numbers that then can move us to phase 4, which would be to get to an RFP where we actually hire somebody to do said work. So John, does that help you as far as confidence in what the motion is really looking for?
Yes, it does. That's fair enough. Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Leishman, I saw your card and then I did see the clerk. Go ahead, Connie.
Yes, thank you. I will support that motion because I think we have to at least find out what we're looking at. I honestly think that if we go through and discuss the renovations, Burnside discusses the renovations that they're talking about, it might actually be less than the 520, the original estimate. So I'm hoping that that's what will happen. It's a lovely hall. I hate to lose it. So let's do what we can to save it.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor Measures. To you, to the rest of council, you can amend the motion that Councillor McKechnie put on the floor, because for previous hall boards, we did add the caveat to receive updated cost estimates. And also there was a second portion of the resolution that a further report be brought back to council for discussion. So if you wanted actually worded in there, we could include that information regarding MVCA and NEC permits are included as well, if council wanted to put that in the
I'll tell you what, before we go any further, Madam Clerk, would you read back a full motion that would be presented that using Councillor McKechnie's input? Hello, Deputy Mayor. I can hear your phone call. Nice to hear you.
Project on it's diamond storage. It's yeah. So
yeah,
you
Deputy
know
Mayor. Yeah, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Clerk.
So the way the motion would read would that Council of the Township of Clearview hereby approve moving forward with option 1 as outlined in the presentation for the Dunedin Hall to receive updated cost estimates and information on MVCA and NEC permits, and that a further report be brought back to council for discussion, and that it be funded from the existing hall's renovation reserve.
All right, Councillor McKechnie, are you comfortable with that wording on that motion? One moment, Barry.
Could I have the motion read again? That's not the motion I read. That's not the motion I put forward.
Okay.
It seems to me that the clerk has changed it on me.
Okay, Councillor McKechnie, let's go back to the clerk. Madam Clerk, would you please reread it again?
Thank you, Mayor Measures. And Councillor McKechnie is correct. I added the additional information if council was for that, and if Councillor McKechnie as the mover was for that. So the additional information I added was to your first part of the resolution. I said, and to receive updated cost estimate and information on MVCA and NEC permits. And then I added a second portion to the resolution saying that a further report be brought back to council for discussion. And then it went in that it be funded from the existing hall's renovation reserve.
Councillor McKechnie?
Okay, I mean, it hasn't really been changed that much. I just, all I did was I took my motion from the motions that were made on the previous halls. And so, but that's fine. I'll go with the clerk's recommendation there. So I'm happy with that amendment.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor McKechnie. Mr. Burton, go ahead. I know you've been patient. Mr. Burton.
have to unmute. Sorry, I got to find the button to unmute. I'm not that quick at finding the buttons. I don't see the need for the NEC mentioned in there because we already know we don't need a permit. So we've explained that. So I don't know. And John requiring the information of whether it's for private really has no relevance to, because the motion is referring to it's being done by the township anyways. So I just don't think the NEC portion of it is. I will find out that information for you, John, but I don't think it's pertinent to the
Okay, John, Mr. Broderick, go ahead. No, you're muted. There we go.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. It does give me a much higher level of confidence with it. Yes, you can make the argument that it's not necessarily, but it does certainly give me a higher level of confidence, and I could. With it, I can freely support the motion.
Okay.
If I may, Your Worship, I can send you a copy of the email from the director that says the exemption that we do not need to have a permit. Would that be satisfactory?
I would still like to know what would happen if it was in private hands.
Okay, I don't think it's pertinent, but I'm not going to make an issue out of it. I'll support the motion as it stands, but I still don't feel it's pertinent. But
so thank you. For clarity, Mr. Burton, are you the seconder on the motion?
I am the seconder of the motion, so
Madam
I
Clerk,
will second the amendment.
Thank you. Okay, so we're all good. Anybody got any further questions on the concerns or the questions on the motion as presented? All right, seeing none, I'm prepared to call the motion. Council, you've heard the motion now read twice by the clerk. Is there anybody who would like to have it read a third time? Seeing none, I'm prepared to call the motion. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for your assistance on that. And thank you, Councillor McKechnie, for your motion. All right, Mr. Vachon, we have one more hall to have a great discussion on. I'll let you lead off and tell us about Duntroon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, looking for thumbs up with respect to seeing my presentation on your screen. Perfect. Thank you, Council. So yes, our last hall, the Benchman Hall. So again, very similar template. Again, I will read the resolution that was provided by the Duntroon Hall Board. It was moved by Roz St. Clair and seconded by Jim Campbell. That be it resolved that the Duntroon Hall Board hereby approve the proposed draft letter and site plans and send to Terry Vachon to communicate the Hall Board's wishes in moving forward with the AODA renovations. Again, to provide a little bit of clarity, I did email this morning, Council, the letter that was received by the Hall Board, but I also captured most of, if not all, the information in that letter in the presentation today as well. So you will also see that. So again, very similar to the previous 5 Hall Board presentations, the list of modified FADS work that is required. Sorry, the list of FADS work that is required at the Duntroon Hall. The amounts above reflects the 2019 estimates as well as the 2021 approximate estimates, including, sorry, I'm forgetting the word. Sorry, Your Worship, I forget the word that I'm looking for here. Anyways, the increase over the course of the couple of years. Again, on the left side, there was 3 options that was provided. For the lack of space, I removed the third one, which was to sell the hall for $1. Again, that was provided to Council. The Duntroon Hall Board also was not interested in that option. Again, it's not on this screen because for lack of space. A second option that was provided to the Duntroon Hall Board was to demolish the existing hall and build a new building. Again, with the 75-25% commitments from both the Township as well as from the Hall Board. Again, there was amounts that was proposed with respect to square footage and what those price tags would look like if you were to build brand new. It would also, the new building would be fully FADS compliant and obviously would also be energy efficient. And no elevators would be required. Again, Duntroon Hall Board were not interested in demolishing and building brand new, and it was rejected by the Hall Board. A third option that was provided by Council was to implement modified FADS to the existing building, again with the same 75-25% commitments. This would include the kitchen renovations. This would also include investigating installing a stair lift versus an elevator. Again, very similar to the Sunnydale Hall as an example. So this would also be explored. There was also concerns about the costs of operating and inspecting elevators. So yeah, so the Duntroon Hall Board was, the feedback that they provided to Council was that they agreed in implementing modified FAD renovations to the existing building. They would like to provide their own modified FADS designs. They have created their own AODA designs and have provided us and have provided Council those proposals. They want to bring in their own architect, Lloyd Hunt, to have their plan reviewed and make the necessary code-based changes. Along with the entrance renovations, they plan to improve the downstairs fire exit, incorporate an upstairs fire exit on the west wall, upgrade the upstairs washrooms, replace the carpeting, improve the west wall drainage, and upgrade the furnace. Also, they're willing to work with the Township towards fundraising $25,000 and up to $100,000 by 2025. The percentage amounts could vary, again, depending on the final project costs. If we were to use numbers on the left of 920,000, which is pretty much the maximum amount, it could represent their 25,000 to 100,000 could represent approximately 3% to 11% of the total cost. Again, if we use 920 as the full amount. It was also unknown if they want to include the kitchen upgrades to meet the fire code standards. Didn't mention anything about that. But again, being consistent with the other halls, this probably should be included. Some key notes for council to consider. The Duntroon Hall Board has expressed a willingness to proceed with AODA renovations. They want to provide their own designs that they have created with their own in-house expertise. Clearview Township engineers would have to review their designs and ultimately approve the concepts. Again, no in-house renovations or donated materials or services would be permitted under the Clearview Township's procurement process and construction liability protocols. Clearview Township would hire the services of RG Burnside engineering firm to manage the tendering and construction process. Council approves the final specs and designs of the hall renovations, again, in consultation with the Duntroon Hall Board. So the final say is done by council. Council, with the hired services of their engineers, will be responsible for ensuring all the renovations are completed as per the approved specifications and designs. And finally, council may or may not choose to postpone any decisions until they review all of the individual hall boards reports. Some possible next steps for council to consider. Option number one is to hire RG Burnsides to review the Duntroon Hall Board's designs that has been provided for AODA compliance and approve or provide a final concept. Include the kitchen commercial fire renovations. Provide an estimated cost of the project as a whole as per the final designs. Again, staff predicts that the cost to do that review is approximately $10,000, a little bit more than the other halls, and also provide approximately the same timelines of about approximately 3 months. Option number two is to not review Duntroon Hall Board's design and simply renovate the modified fads as per RG Burnside's list of renovations and estimated costs, include the kitchen commercial fire renovations. Again, return to council with final project specifications and estimated costs, including commercial fire standard renovations. This would cost approximately $5,000, again, with the same 3-month timeline. Option number four, that's still on the table. Oh, sorry, I apologize. This should say option number three. I skipped the number there, bit of a typo. Option number three would be to demolish and rebuild a brand new building as per council's option that was provided to them. And option four, again, would be status quo, no renovations. Again, we would also update the management agreement between the Clearview Township and the Duntroon Hall Board to include renewed operations of the Duntroon Hall, the financial commitment of the Duntroon Hall Board with corresponding financing provisions, and clarify any outstanding misapprehensions in the existing agreement. We would also create a construction agreement with the Duntroon Hall Board regarding the level of responsibilities and liabilities between both parties. We would also return to council with both final agreements above for council's approval. And finally, we would ultimately release a public tender for renovations of the Duntroon Hall Board. For council's review, this was the proposed design that was provided by the in-house expertise of the Duntroon Hall Board. Again, it's a concept, but I wanted to share this with council so you can kind of get a bit of an idea for the ideas that they had proposed. And that's all I have, Your Worship, for the Duntroon Hall Board. I will stop sharing my screen so that you may see all of council.
All right, thank you.
Available for any questions, Your Worship.
All right, thank you very much, Terry. If you may, I'd like to ask the first question this time. The first one actually is just a simple one. In the design, there's one unique feature about Duntroon, or several unique features, but the one that stands out in my eyes is that there are 2 kitchens on that facility. There's the downstairs kitchen, which is a full-size kitchen, and then upstairs off the bar, there's also a smaller lunch kitchen type of facility. And so in your notes, it talks about, can we eliminate one of the kitchens during the renovation? So somewhere along the line, can we get that clarified, that we are in fact asking or looking at, we're going to spend some money to do commercial kitchen improvements, and can we clarify that we have one kitchen? Because having an additional cooking surface on the second floor would actually be problematic, I suspect, for our fire inspectors, and also for, just to say that we have a commercial kitchen and yet you can still cook upstairs. So it's I just think that's one piece about the Duntroon Hall should get clarified. So Terry, do you agree with that review?
Yep, I agree, Your Worship, and that's not a problem. I've jotted it down in my notes, and we'll get that clarified, Your Worship.
All right, thank you. Now, that's my only question so far. I'm looking to members of council. Do you have any questions? Okay, Deputy Mayor and then John Broderick. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
So I don't understand why it's going to cost $10,000 to review existing plans and only $5,000 if RJ Burnside makes the plans. I think that's a little extreme. I mean, we're already saying that we're going to be in consultation with the plans. So why not go? I mean, and here's a community, that has gone to the extent to hire their own architect and get their plans already done. So I can see, yes, they should go to Burnside to be reviewed and approved by Burnside, but why $10,000? Why $5,000 more than if Burnside actually has to draw the plans? Here they only have to review them. I think that's a little personally outrageous.
Perhaps we can ask Terry to give us an accounting of where that number comes from in his options. Terry.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Deputy Mayor Burton. Again, those amounts that are provided are just estimates. I had provided clarity to that on our first meeting we had regarding the first hall. So those 5,000 and 10,000 amounts, again, are just estimates. You never really know until you actually go through the process and find out how much time you spend with the engineers. The reason why that we've predicted that it might cost $10,000 versus $5,000 is that there's more consultation that has to be done with their team. They talked about bringing in their architects. So when you bring in more people involved, you have to coordinate more meetings, more feedback. Instead of having, say, 1 or 2 meetings, you might have to have 3 or 4 meetings. So the thought there was that there may be more of RG Burnside's time that is required to work with other parties that they may have. So the more time you have, the more it costs. Again, it might still just be $5,000, Your Worship, through you to Deputy Mayor Burton, but I want to prepare council that if it does cost more, that you're aware of that, and that you didn't get blindsided, that you're aware. If it's less than that, that's great.
Okay, so follow-up question, if I may, Your Worship. So who's paying their architect? They're paying him, or they're expecting us to pay their architect?
Good question. Mr. Vachon, any idea?
Again, through you, Your Worship, to Deputy Mayor Burton, that hasn't been determined yet. But I would assume at this point that they would be hoping that the township would pay for their architect. Perhaps their architect is providing free services, but that hasn't been determined. Again, I'm only going based on an assumption at this point.
Well, I mean, they have a very competent, Lloyd Hunt is a very competent architect in our area. So, well known for the work he does and stuff. So, I'd be willing to put forth a motion to support the option of them using their architect, provided it doesn't exceed $5,000 for the review.
Are you making a motion, Deputy Mayor?
I did. I just made a motion.
I'm looking for a seconder. Is that Mr. Lamers? John Lamers? Are you seconding that? Thank you. John Lamers is seconding that motion. Okay, we can. Madam Clerk, I think we can discuss that if you like as a motion. Although the motion isn't fulfilled like our other motions, we can then have a second motion to fulfill it, which limits from $10,000 to $5,000. I think is what the objective would be. Madam Clerk, what's your interpretation on that?
Thank you, Mayor Measure. Sorry, I was just typing the motion out. You can cover it all in one motion, or you can do it 2 separate motions. I didn't know if Deputy Mayor Burton wanted to go with the same style as previous motions, and then we include a second or third part to that motion, just that provided that it doesn't exceed $5,000 to view their architect's design.
Whatever works for the clerk is fine with me. I'll leave it in the capable hands of the clerk, which he feels is the better way to go.
There's an endorsement for you, Madam Helmke. I tell you what, since we have it on the floor, I'll ask if there's anybody who would like to have a discussion on that. I think I saw McKechnie's card a moment ago. Go ahead, Doug, and then I'll get to John and
Thank
Tom.
you, Your Worship. And to Barry's question there, and as the council rep for the Duntroon Hall,
Correct.
I think that they would be willing to go with that. They've got $25,000 that they say that they're willing to put towards the renovations. I think that for the review of for Burnsides to review their designs, their plans, and everything, anything over 5,000, I don't think that they would have, the Duntroon Hall would have an issue with paying that. I hate to speak for them, but so I agree with what Barry's saying. If it's more than 5,000, then they have to pony up. I agree with that, and I don't think that they would have a problem with that. One thing that we have to note is they've gone to a lot of work, and hence that's the reason why theirs is the last report to Terry, or this is the last one to come forward, because they have put a lot of work into it. They weren't really happy with the original sort of designs and everything, and they thought, well, we can do this better and cheaper and such. So they've had a number of meetings and such. So I think they're looking to get the costs down in the long run and such. So I would support Barry's motion on that. I think that's reasonable.
All right, thank you, Doug, for that comment. I think John was next, John Broderick, and then look at that. I'm getting a phone call from Saskatchewan right now. I'm not going to take that. Thank you very much. I'll go with Mr. Broderick, and then I'll go to Mr. Patterson. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Terry, during the discussions, I'm just curious if the whole board gave you any indication as to why they weren't interested in the new build versus the reno, especially when you consider the costs are so close, and the costs of operation in the future, when you factor that in. Any thoughts there?
Terry?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Broderick. No indication was provided by the Duntroon Hall Board on why they were not interested in the new build. Again, my best assumption based on some discussions that I've had with their chair is that the amounts that you see in front of you, you're correct, Councillor Broderick. If we take the complete list of modified fads that RJ Burnside's provided versus a new build, it's very close. But I think Councillor McKechnie just mentioned it, that they felt that that's at the higher end of what's required to be done at that hall. And they felt that their designs would cost a lot less. So if you take the cost of their designs compared to a new building, they felt there was a bigger gap there. So that's again, my best assumption. I don't want to speak on their behalf, very similar to what Councillor McKechnie said, but the best assumption is they felt that their design will cost a lot less. So they're not prepared to spend the extra amounts for a new building.
Well, with that in mind, I'd certainly be interested in their design and the costs thereof, but I at the same time, I really don't want to lock us into something without having that knowledge ahead of time.
All right, go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, just to add, Your Worship, and you are correct, Councillor Broderick, but the resolution that's been put forward is that we would research their design, and we would get a final cost, including any other renovations that's in their list of requirements, and bring that back to council for your final review. So you will still have an opportunity to review that final cost with $21, and ultimately make that final decision based on that review.
Thank you, Terry.
So you're not locked in, I guess is what I'm trying to say, Councillor Broderick. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Mr. Broderick. Mr. Patterson, you're next. And then I think I saw Tom or Doug, you put your card up again. So Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to understand the process, the review. We've talked about it for all the other halls in the $8,000 range or so. My understanding, it varies with the hall and recent history and past repair requirements, is that there would be essentially Burnside would visit the site and review any plans they have now, update them, but there would be a full inspection as we're moving closer to a final design of the building, so that we would have a very good indication from Burnside that these estimates are now moving towards tender level pricing. Is that the
Agreed.
understanding?
I completely concur. That's where I believe we're going.
So if we have a competitive design that's coming in for an architect, the architect is going to do the same inspection, or it's not worth the paper he draws on. And I would expect Burnside to do the same. Now, unless they're working together, I don't understand why we would expect it to be cheaper. It sounds to me like it's there's two 8,000s going on, call it 16, we're getting it for 10. I'm just throwing numbers around here. We have two groups working on it. And 5, for to say we're going to fund the 5, I would say means that they would probably have to fund the difference themselves. And I'm kind of surprised at this stage, since we're here at a meeting making the next major step, not the final one, but this is now becoming a good faith issue from now on. Why we don't know some of these things. Like there were some details at the beginning of the survey. We don't know for sure what's the presentation, what's in their final design. And to not know who's going to pay for the architect, either Duntroon has said we have our own architect and he's doing pro bono, or he's making a donation. I would think we need to know that. Anyways, I'm very skeptical about the moving it down to 5,000. It sounds like two groups are doing the same thing in tandem, and there'll be at least the same as the $8,000 estimates we got on all the others. So 10,000 is a pretty good price in my mind.
Okay, I'm hearing your argument actually, Councillor Patterson, and it's rather compelling. But my concern here is that the volunteers that have engaged these services from Mr. Hunt, there's a lot of unknowns because we are not on that board, and neither do we have their representative here in front of us to help us answer some of those questions. Given that we do have Councillor McKechnie here, he is our council representative, but I don't imagine Mr. McKechnie was involved in some of those discussions that their volunteers have had with Mr. Hunt as they've demonstrated. So I hear you. As far as a process, I'd like to just talk about that for a moment for the sake of everyone. Again, this process so far is that we had estimates done by R.J. Burnside, which go back to 2018, presented to us in 2019. Numbers and costs have increased dramatically. The report that was given by Mr. Vachon earlier in this year to all of us, first of all in camera and then on to all of our hall boards, included basically a warning that the cost of construction continues to rise. And so we were given the heads up that changes are imminent. Further to that, actually knowing specifics about all the work on each individual hall, with round numbers like $20,000 to do a kitchen renovation. That's what we've been working with. We've just applied it to all 6 with that number, when the reality is some may cost 15, some may cost 25. We don't really know until we actually get drawings and architectural work done. So as I understand it, through the clerk and to Mr. Vachon, council has asked for some better accounting for the scope of work and the details of the work, such that we can approach the stage to go to an RFP to hire a contractor. Looking up at the staff, are you comfortable with those statements? Mr. Vachon, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I am comfortable with those statements. Again, just to refresh Council's memory, is that the direction that Council provided to staff was to bring back reports for AODA renovations only. When we started going through the process, other items came up, such as the kitchen fire code renovations, septic tanks, other items. So now Council is providing us direction to come back with a final all-in price. So yes, Your Worship, I'm very comfortable with your comments.
Okay, so I appreciate. Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
So I do have a question though, and perhaps I'm just seeking out some clarity, Your Worship, because maybe I don't understand Deputy Mayor's Burton's motion. The way I understood the way it was said was that it would be $5,000 for the base renovations plus up to 5,000 for any other renovations, so a total of 10. If it's only a maximum of 5,000 for all of it, I do have some concerns, Your Worship. One, the amounts that were provided are, like I said before, are only estimates. And two, Council has not provided any up to or ceiling amounts for any other halls. Again, I was very open and transparent at the beginning, Your Worship, to say that those are only estimates. Once you start working with engineers and you start digging a little deeper, you never really know what the final amount is until you go through that process. And that's why Council hadn't provided an up to ceiling on 5 other halls. If we're going to do that for the Duntroon Hall, I do have some concerns because then the process is completely different. If it's up to 10,000 as a maximum, I'm okay with that. That makes sense. But if it's only 5, that might cause some concern and some issues, especially if you're asking them to pay the difference when we have not asked the other halls to do so.
Okay, I appreciate that input, and that's good advice to Council for them to consider when we consider the motion here that's now presented in front of us. Madam Clerk, did you have anything you wanted to add? And then I'll go back to Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Measures. I think it's probably an appropriate time to kind of read out the motion on the floor, as Deputy Mayor Burton kind of gave me creative license just to draft it. And that way everyone can be clear and I can make any friendly amendments to it if I've misinterpreted anything. So
all right, can I ask you to hold for a second then? Can I just ask then to the Deputy Mayor, would you withdraw your initial motion? And then that way we can go to the Madam Clerk's full motion. Does that make sense, Barry?
Sure, that's fine. That's fine, yes.
All right, that makes sense then. Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, go ahead and read that, and I haven't forgotten you, Tom, and coming back to you. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Measures. And just for clarity, I have included the Deputy Mayor's request regarding the $5,000, so I'll read it out and we'll go from there. So the Council of the Township of Clearview hereby approve moving forward with option 1 as outlined in the presentation for the Duntroon Hall, provided it doesn't exceed $5,000 for RJ Burnsides to review the Hall Board's architect design, and then a further report be brought back to Council for discussion, and then it be funded from the existing Hall's renovation reserve.
Okay, before I call for anything on that, I'm going to continue our discussion. Hang on, Barry. Go back to Tom. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I have nothing else to say. I said my piece. You summarized it in a longer version, and Terry came back and agreed with you. And so the 3 of us, I think, are saying the same thing. The motion doesn't say that.
Okay, thank you. Barry, go ahead.
Yeah, so to me, the motion is very clear. It's the review part. And that's what brought the issue up, because Burnside wanted 5,000 to review their drawings, but they want 10,000 to review somebody else's drawings. And it's the review of the drawings or the plans, not the creation of. So I think the motion is very specific.
Okay. All right, Terry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, just to provide more clarification, it's not Burnsides that are asking for those amounts. Those are estimates that are provided by staff. This is my best guess of what I think it would cost to go through that process. The Burnsides have not provided us a quote because they don't know really how much time it will actually take. So those are just amounts that I've proposed to Council, what I think it will cost.
All right, that reflects to me actually on a conversation I believe we had in the very first meeting when we talked about how through yourself, Terry, and the CAO, and in fact our treasurer, we will be managing, you folks will be managing this project of 6 different projects as we move forward with RJ Burnside underneath our current agreement and contract with RJ Burnside to provide engineering services. So that's I think that's how that's played out. Okay, Barry, you're being persistent. I know you are. I haven't forgotten about you, Doug. Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, I'd be willing to amend the motion to take out the $5,000. If that's because now Terry's right. It's just an estimate that staff has provided. No one, so it makes sense to take the limitation of the $5,000 out.
All right.
So I'm willing to do that.
All right, Mr. Lamers, you're the seconder. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay, but as long as we're not paying for 2 engineers, like if they want to have their own engineers and then we have to hire our own engineers to look at their papers, we shouldn't be paying for both of them.
I agree. Terry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, to provide more clarity, they don't have any engineers, Councillor, through you, they only have an architect. So RJ Burnsides also have an architect and they're obviously engineers. So there wouldn't be 2 architects being used. It would either be their architect if their architect is willing, again, depending on what arrangement or agreement that the Duntroon Hall has with them, or they would be using RJ Burnside's architect. But 1 architect would be used and 1 engineer, which would be RJ Burnside's.
Okay. Okay, I'm comfortable with that. And before we make any more further amendments, Mr. McKechnie, and then I'm going to ask for mover and seconder on the motion. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I was just going to say, I agree with taking the $5,000 limit out. And I understand what Councillor Lamers is saying there. In actual fact, there's 3 architects. I know that Jim Campbell is an architect and he's done the plans for free. So, you know, they've just had some free work done for them there by Jim Campbell. So anyway, I think it's we can't treat them any differently than the other halls. And I don't think in the long run, whether it's Lloyd Hunt or RJ Burnside, we may be looking at an extra 1,000 or 2, you know, in the grand scheme of things. I don't know, but it's not going to be a whole lot of money. And I think just to keep it simple and just take the $5,000 limit out. So,
all right. Okay. At this point, Madam Clerk has a motion that I believe has now been amended again. So why don't you read it and then I'll ask for a mover and seconder.
Thank you, Mayor Measures. And from my understanding, we technically do have a mover and a seconder, but you did ask Deputy Mayor Burton to withdraw. So I just want to be clear on.
Yeah, okay. So, but Madam Clerk, the first motion he had was quite simplified and we were discussing that. And so I think we now needed to bring the complete consolidated motion forward, which is the one you have in front of you, Madam Clerk. And so I asked the Deputy Mayor to withdraw his simplified motion. Okay?
Yep.
So Madam Clerk has a motion. I'd like it read, and then I'll ask for mover and seconder.
So the motion before council is that council of the Township of Clearview hereby approve moving forward with option 1 as outlined in the presentation for the Duntroon Hall to receive updated cost estimates, and that a further report be brought back to council for discussion, and then it be funded from this existing hall's renovation reserve.
That's a consolidated report. Deputy Mayor Burton. Moving?
Moving.
Mr. Lamers, seconding. Thank you. Okay, any discussion on what we've heard now? Since we actually have an actual motion on the floor. Nothing further? All right. Anything else? Nobody needs it read again? Then I'll call the motion. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council, for that. Terry, we do have a motion, actually, a recommendation to receive all of your reports, such as the formal motion. We can read that, but I do have one other item and I wanted to discuss with Council, and I'm hoping our CAO, John Ferguson, might be able to chip in as well. But in the meantime, I'll bring it up before I bring this up, and that is to do with this entire project. It was mentioned in the first meeting we had talking about whether project management is something that we need to face given staff resources. Certainly, we have to lean on our engineers at RJ Burnside as a result of these 6 motions that now move us into this. And so I'm wondering, managing that workload and paying, putting some effort into that, as well as perhaps other, projects that we're facing in 2021, 2022 here at the township, whether we should be looking at some type of contractor from RJ Burnside to act as a project manager, or do we have confidence that our staff are not going to be overwhelmed with the amount of work? So I'm looking at you, Terry, because you've put a ton of work into this project so far. So, how's your day going, Terry?
The day's going great, Your Worship.
So I'm wondering, Terry, do you have a comment about the workload to handle these 6 projects and operating and managing the information that's going to flow from that?
Absolutely, Your Worship. So if I understand your comments correctly, so once the tenders have been released, we would at this point rely on RJ Burnsides to be the project managers on site. They're the ones that would provide the staff to make sure that the renovations are being done as per the specifications. There is 6 halls that will be potentially done if council decides to go with all 6 halls for renovations. Are there opportunity to have a separate project manager to represent the township and council's needs, to be that project guy or person on the ground while renovations are being completed? There's definitely an opportunity. It wouldn't be myself or me or my department that has the skills or expertise to be that engineer on the ground. We don't have that at this point. We're relying on RJ Burnside, but Your Worship, if council would so choose to have a third party or an independent contractor as another option to represent council's needs to make sure that all the projects are being done as per the specs, that's definitely an option for council to consider.
All right. The only reason I bring it up with council here today and with yourself, Terry, is simply that as we move down this project, it's going to get busier and busier. And to be fair, council hasn't had a conversation with an architect or one of our engineers about this project. Respectfully, we've heard from you a lot, and we appreciate your input. But as we get deeper into this, that's where I wanted to make sure that council continues to have the confidence of RJ Burnside as this project develops, and maybe we can get a relationship between council and yourself and RJ as they move this project forward. So that's all I'm asking. I noticed there's no one on board from RJ today, but that's okay. We'll maybe leave that for another time. So I wanted to leave that on behalf of council with staff to consider when you prepare your reports as you're moving forward on this. All right, anything further? I'll read the motion to receive. Yes, go ahead, Terry.
Sorry, Your Worship. I just one final comment, if I may. Now that all 6 hall reports are complete, I just want to reassure council that we have tight timelines. I know that we know that the hall boards want to move. They want this to get going. They're all energetic, and so are we. So we're going to be pushing our engineers to get these reports done, Your Worship. We're committed to that process. As well as I want to again assure council that we're going to try to be as frugal as we can with the costs of engineering. Again, we've provided estimates to council at this point, but we will do our best to manage those timelines and manage that amount so that we don't spend too much, and we'll try to be as efficient as we possibly can. So I just want to provide that assurance to council, Your Worship, as you receive my report, that we are committed to doing that as best as we possibly can.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor Burton.
Yeah, sorry, my want to speak card fell off the table and slid under the china cabinet, so that's why I had to stick my hand up. Of course, it can only happen to me. I had a conversation with one of our local contractors today, and especially with my experience of building a retirement home, materials are coming back down to some normal prices. So it's good news to see that they're coming back down and coming back in line to where they were prior to COVID. Probably going to still be a slightly higher, but they are coming down.
Yeah, and back up that too. The other challenge still remains, though, is labor. Many contractors are still having difficulty securing labor to get jobs done. So time takes a little longer to complete. But that's an ongoing battle that we're having in multi-levels of our economy across our community and the whole region. So, all right, members of council, I got a last recommendation on this file. Well, I'll read that. I'll look for a mover and seconder. Recommendation be it resolved, the council of the township hereby receive the Dunedin Community Center and Duntroon Community Center presentations for information. Can I have a mover and seconder? Mr. Broderick, Councillor Dunedin. All those in favor? Thank you. That carries. All right, council, we've got two more. Bylaw to confirm. Recommendation be it resolved that bylaw 2188 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the August 30, 2021 council meeting be presented and read a first, second, and third time, finally passed on the 30th day of August 2021. Mover and seconder on the file there. Where are we at? Broderick and McKechnie. Broderick and McKechnie. And I'll call the bylaw. All those in favor? And the bylaw carries. Thank you. And our motion to adjourn. Recommendation be it resolved that council meeting be adjourned. What are we at here? At 3:09 p.m. Be it resolved, council meeting be adjourned at 3:09 p.m. Mover and seconder. Lamers and McKechnie. I was looking for you, Councillor Leishman. Anyway, all those in favor? And council is adjourned. Thank you very much. And there we go. The month of August, it's over. How about that?